Hey everybody, Jason here. Filming my second video of the morning on the way to work for RPG Day 2019. It is day and prompt number 20, and that word is scary. So scary, obviously, I think for most of us is gonna prompt running scary role-playing games. And I have never ran a scary role-playing game. I don't think I mean, I've run games in Ravenloft, but that's not really scary per se. That's just more D&D with more of a dark sort of gothic paint slapped onto it, which is not a bad thing. I love Ravenloft. Growing up, Ravenloft was my favorite setting, and everybody else that I played with, it was not their favorite setting, so they got mad. Not mad, but I don't think they enjoyed the Ravenloft games that I ran as much as they enjoyed stuff like set in Forgotten Realms or Greyhawk or other modules that I would run or whatever. In fact, it's funny. The only time we ran games in other worlds other than Forgotten Realms is when we bought the modules for them. And anytime we created our own adventures, it was always in Forgotten Realms because that's that was our favorite box set and all that stuff. Anyway, that's off topic. Another day. Make sure I'm not speeding here. So, scary. I actually own a couple of, this is a big surprise, I own a couple of quote-unquote scary role-playing games. I mean, any role-playing game technically can be scary. You could have a scary adventure written for Cartoon Action Hour, or a scary adventure written for Earthdawn Age of Legend, or a scary adventure written for Star Wars Edge of the Empire. But some games are specifically tailored to scary games because of the nature of the system or the setting or whatever, the IP, such as like Call of Cthulhu. I've got one of my friends got me a slasher film supplement for Fate, and I've got the Slasher Flick role-playing game by Spectrum Games. I think I've mentioned before, and I would love to run Slasher Flick. Maybe, as a matter of fact, it's a couple months away from Halloween. Maybe what I'll do is I'll get I'll bust out my Slasher Flick books and maybe create a one-shot for Halloween and do a little Halloween adventure, a Slasher Flick. That would be pretty fucking sweet. I think my group would like that. Anyway, so scary. Yeah, to me, I think making things scary in a role-playing game, I think you can have the theme, but to invoke actual fear in someone in a role-playing game, and this is just my personal opinion, I think is going to be next to impossible to do. I think fear and being scared comes from a place other than, it takes a certain setting or ambiance, or the mood has to be right. Like when you're sitting at a table with your friends, and regardless of if the lights are down low and you got candles and spooky sound effects, and the room is set up to look like an old style, rundown house or basement and cobwebs, and that mood could be right. But when you're sitting at a table with your friends and you're discussing and you're being described, settings and scenarios and descriptions of rooms and characters, and you're interacting with each other, the role playing where you're at, your table, the role playing table, is a place of security anyway. It's a place of comfort and security with your friends, and you can let loose, and you can be yourself, and you can be other people. And I think it's hard to invoke that primal feeling of fear and being scared at a role-playing game table. So I think it's more of a theme than it is a feeling of being scared or scary. Rather, so I think that if your intentions are, and again, this is just coming from a person who has never really ran a scary role-playing game with the intentions of making players feel fear. And it could just be that, growing up watching horror movies my whole life, not so much the past, 10 years or so, I've switched over mainly to action movies and sci-fi, and because my time is so limited. But growing up, I just watched horror movies just nonstop. That was my thing. So fear and scary things to me aren't really scary. Maybe I've become a little desensitized to it. Scary things for me are like my daughter getting hurt, or my wife getting hurt, or losing my job, or my car breaking down. Things like that's scary for me. But so I think if you're going to go into a scary game, and this, I'm giving you advice on something I've never done before, so take that with a grain of salt. If you go in with the intention of playing a scary role-playing game with the intentions of bringing out fear, like true fear, and being scary to your players, you're probably setting yourself up for failure, and you're probably setting your players up for failure if they know ahead of time that's what you're trying to do. I think what might be a better idea is to go in with the intention of having a scary theme and a scary setting, and letting the players buy into that and react accordingly with their characters, not with themselves. Like, if you want to scare the characters, that's more doable than probably scaring your players. And I think you have to probably make a distinction in that. Like, if I'm going to run a slasher flick game by Spectrum Games, go check that shit out. It's awesome. Great little book. Lots of supplements. Very cheap game. Oozing with flavor and setting, ambiance, and mood and stuff. So anyway, and that's maybe a good time to have a session 0 is when you're playing a genre you've never played before. For example, something scary. And beforehand, I would like to probably have a session 0 before we play slasher flick, and let the character or the players know, this is a horror genre. And the same thing if I were going to run Call of Cthulhu, which I plan on doing. I got the starter box for that. A session 0, letting them know that when things are scary in the game, they can have their characters respond appropriately to add more flavor to the game, rather than me trying to invoke fear and being scary to the players. So, I'll let them know up front, you guys are not going to be probably scared by whatever I bring into the game, any themes that I might bring into the game. They, like serial killers, or, you're stuck in a car and it's on fire, how do you get out? For a player, it's not scary because it's not real. But for the characters in the game, it's very real. So you want to have your characters in your game respond appropriately to the situation, and not the way the player would respond sitting at the table. So I guess, I don't know, I'm hoping that this is making sense, because I'm having a hard time articulating what I'm trying to say. Oh, excuse me. That's probably why. So I think running a scary themed game, you have to have player buy-in, and they have to role play their characters appropriately, not just like, oh, it's, in D&D, you never really have a character show any kind of fear when you're trying to cross a rickety bridge or whatever, because you're like, oh, it's a rickety bridge that's starting to fall apart. I'll just make a couple dex checks to see if I can get across it okay. And that's fine, we all do that, but in reality, you might be like, holy shit, this bridge is fucked up. I could fall off here and fall into this pit below and die or whatever. But in the games, we're just like, oh, we'll make a couple of dice rolls, make sure we get across it okay and don't fall. there's not a lot of fear, and it's a scary situation for the character, but not for the player. So you have to have that player buy-in and respond appropriately. And I think that's important. Sorry, there's sun everywhere. And that's really all I have to say. I'm starting to repeat myself, and I apologize for that. But I think that can go with any genre, not just the scary genre. And that's something to think about also, is maybe, player buy-in with any genre, and maybe that's a good thing to talk about with your players. Anyway, another conversation that kind of detracted and evolved away from the original topic, I guess. But anyway, thanks for watching. Thanks for being part of RPG Day 2019. And hope you guys are having fun. Play some good games, and I will see you guys later.